Welcome to the My Creative Life vlog. This is our process video for using embossing powder. So you can see I have a table full of supplies here. Just wanted to do a little reminder of what my 4-product challenge was and kind of talk about some of the things that we'll be using today. We are doing some tag art. You can see my tag has changed. I have inked it up a bit. We also, in my 4-product challenge, I'm using a background stamp, a stamp and die set from Paper Tray Ink, and this paper pad from 7 Gypsies. So I'm going to set those off aside, except for this one, because we're going to work on this one in a moment here. Some of the work I've done ahead of time, and I just wanted to show that to you before I start on the rest of it. With that stamp and die set, I'll talk about some of the ways I used embossing powder, and then we're going to go ahead and emboss this tag. One of the ways I used embossing powder is on this little, well, it's going to be a flower background. It is white embossing powder on vellum. I actually really like this look, and then I inked it with chalk ink. And it just adds a really nice dimension to the project because you can still kind of see through it. So that was a fun way to use embossing powder. And then I also used it on my sentiment. The sentiment itself is from Just Right Stampers, but this die set is one of my all-time favorites from Spellbinders. It's called Ribbon Banner. Love this set. This is probably my #1 used set. So it's a great set. One last embossed piece here is this little flower. This is one of the tattered flowers from the Tim Holtz collection, and I used the Tim Holtz embossing powder on here, which is much rougher, and it's meant not to totally cover, so you can see there's some bare spots. And then I also inked the edges in black, and that's going to end up being my flower center. We're going to kind of layer it like this. Mostly I'm working with some browns and oranges, but I always like to add just a little pop of color to my work, something that stands out a little bit. So this time around we went with blue. But what we're going to do in the video today is just quickly to emboss this tag. Set that off to the side. We have lots of different supplies that we used. Now, to do heat embossing, obviously you need some embossing ink. Embossing ink tends to dry very slowly. That allows the embossing powder to adhere so you can add it to your stamped image and then have time to add the powder and heat set it. I have 2 embossing pads, probably tons more. These are the 2 that work the best for me. This one's is by Arranger. It's actually tinted, which I love for every application except clear. Obviously, it don't work very well for that, but it's great for all the other ones because you can actually see slightly if you have the entire stamped image, and that is sometimes one of the hardest things about heat embossing is I don't know if I've gotten a good image. That is particularly true when you're doing sentiments that are really fine detail. Stamp like this is a little bit easier because you got a lot of surface area to work with. So we're actually going to go ahead and emboss this. This, however, I want to be clear. So I'm using the Tim Holtz clear embossing ink. There are plenty of other ones. This is just what I happen to have, so we're going to go ahead and cover our stamp. And it's a nice juicy one, and for some reason they always smell like cinnamon to me, which is, you know, good. Now I could do this the other way around, but I just think it's easier to go ahead and lay it on top and press it down. Now for my clear, I just keep it in this Tupperware or plastic container. It's easy to catch the extras. I do have a tray that I use with my other embossing powder, but for the clear and the white, I prefer this. So now you can probably see it just slightly on there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to heat set that. So I'll be back in a minute to finish up my tag background. Okay, I'm back. I have heat set my stamped image. Obviously the last thing you need to heat emboss is a heat source to melt that powder, and I've already started to color it. You can see the image coming to life. I'm just using a chalk ink. Big fan of chalk inks. Although I could have used another distressed ink here, that would have been fine too. The background on the tag is a distressed ink, but I love the look and blendability of a chalk ink. So now that image has really started to come to life. Now if I wanted that image to stand out even more, I could have used a colored embossing powder, but this way, cleaning up my ink, this way it's a more subtle design. So there's our background. That's the basics, very basics of embossing. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my tag, and I'll be back in a moment to show you the and my tag is almost done. Still got to heat set my little rhinestones, but you can get a good idea of what the tag is going to look like, even though those are not adhered yet. And I'll put some ribbon at the top as well. I'll post the final pictures in the blog. If you have any questions about anything I did here, please let me know. And just to recap everything, we used embossing powder on the vellum of my flower. We used a rough embossing powder or distressed embossing powder by Tim Holtz on my flower center. We have fine embossing powder on our sentiment, and then I used clear embossing powder for my background stamp. So those are lots of different ways to use embossing powder. If you have any questions, please let me know, and be sure to join us next week for a whole new challenge.